I'm pretty sure we survived this long because we complemented each other, men and women.
So Vladimir Lenin sent Willy Münzenberg, who was a German communist, to help him weaken and defeat the United States over a multi-generational period from within.
I have a master's degree in education. One organization that should be done away with is the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education. What is going on there is horrible. It is a political revolution.
Every man should be proud of being a man. Every man should be proud of being a masculine man. Welcome to another episode of the Sovereign Man Podcast. I'm your man, Nicky Ballou, and we've got a fantastic guest lined up for you today. Today's guest is a man who shares a lot of the beliefs and opinions that we here on this show have about manhood, masculinity, and the importance of elevating men and elevating masculinity. He also happens to be a best-selling author who has got a brand new book out. And I'm super excited to chat with him about both his new book and the subject of men and masculinity. I'm speaking of Greg Lawson, aka the Paranormal Detective. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, God bless, brother. Thank you for being here. So, Greg, why don't you tell us a bit about your backstory? Because to be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about your backstory other than what I've read on the internet. You and I are good friends. We have a mutual friend, Jeff Hopp. He's a good man. And, he's your publisher too, I understand. And he's going to soon be my publisher as well. I'm kind of excited about that. I got a new book that I've written for is Doomsday Press. So why don't you tell us your backstory? Let's go from there.
All right. So I grew up, my father was a car salesman, which, that has its own, its own connotations, I guess. So I grew up around a father that was very into sales, very into making money. He owned a Ford dealership. He owned several other businesses. And so I kind of grew up in that. And in turn, he didn't give me a lot of guidance because he was busy. And so I was kind of on my own. And my plan was I really didn't have to do much. But when I got out of high school, he was going to give me a job and I was going to make a lot of money. That was my big plan, right? Well, that didn't quite work out. About 1980, 81, we had a big crash, a big market correction, and Ford and Chrysler crashed. And so all of a sudden, I was a kid that made straight D's in high school, whose parents made too much money to, at this point, get in college. I couldn't get in on my academics. I couldn't get in on, getting a loan or getting a grant because of that. And so I found myself in a very interesting situation where no one was hiring. I had no skills. I had no education. And I went to a gentleman. I went to a temporary agency to get hired, filled out my application, went in for the interview. And this little old man is sitting in there in his little tweed jacket, looking at my application, tells me to sit down, says, Greg, we don't have anything for you. Do you have any skills? I'm like, I worked at Pizza Hut. And, do you have any, you don't have any education listed here? No, I don't have any of that. He goes, son, you need to go in the military. And I was thinking, there's no way in hell I'm going to go in the military. I had long hair at the time, riding motorcycle. I didn't care. 3 weeks later, I was on the bus going to Georgia to join the United States Army and became a paratrooper after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That kind of changed my life. I played sports in elementary, junior high, and part of high school. And I was pretty good at sports, but the competition there was very through assassination, right? I was thinking, we're on the same team. Why are y'all treating me badly? Why are you, there wasn't a team building kind of thing there. It was more of a very strict competition. And it was very strange to me. But when I went into the military, and especially specifically at the 82nd Airborne Division, they have a very, very different philosophy. You develop a completely different leadership style when you go through the military as you would, let's say, in a football team. Football teams are very, very oriented to competition. And you can talk to professional football players that, many teams, it's just the individual guy and how much they're making, and the loyalty isn't there and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the professional side of me. When I got out of the military, I was going to engage what I was doing prior to the military, which I wanted to be an artist. I played guitar and I painted and I sculpted, and I went to go back to university in the fine arts program. And that lasted about a semester, and I kind of ran out of money, and I didn't like living in my brother's, spare bedroom. And my sister said, "Hey, why don't you go down and get hired down at the sheriff's office? They're looking for people." I'm like, "Man, I don't want to be a cop. Are you kidding me?" Yeah. 36 years later, I sit before you.
Wow.
As a patrol lieutenant, at a pretty large agency in Central Texas. And, that's kind of the professional side. The paranormal side's another story.
So wait a second. You didn't want to join the military, and you didn't just join the military. You joined one of the most legendary units in the history of the United States military, the 82nd Airborne. And then you didn't want to be a cop, and you ended up spending 36 years as a cop. How'd that work out?
Pretty much. Yeah. Bizarre, yeah. So when I decided I'd go into the military, I have a very good friend of mine that is now a retired officer, and he spent just about his entire career in special forces. And him and I grew up together, and we played Army together. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be in the Army, I got to jump out of airplanes and shoot guns and stuff. I don't want to be a clerk or a cook or something like that. I want to do the real deal, right? And then once I got in there, it wasn't like playing football in high school where I had all this competition and people are trying to derail me. These people were actually trying to get me to run faster, jump higher, be better at what I was doing. And I really, really loved the Army. I excelled at the Army. I got into the best shape, close to the best shape of my life there. And just loved running, loved doing all the Army stuff, obstacle courses, traveling. And I got to travel to a lot of different places. I was with the Rapid Deployment Unit. So I was in Alaska, I was in Central America. I was in Europe and Northern Africa and the Middle East. And it was fantastic. And the leadership that I learned there was somewhat applicable to the civilian side. And then when I got out and I was going to be an artist, and like I said, the money, I had a really short-term view of things at that time. And instead of sticking it out, I want to make some more money. Maybe I can go to school part-time in the evening and I can make money. And these people right here are going to hire me right now and train me. And they did. And then I really realized, well, I really like that job also. I never thought it. On my 20-year high school reunion, I went to the 20-year high school reunion. We're all sitting there. And our class was only about 120 people. And they had this little formal thing, and they're doing awards. So like our class president, got an award for doing stuff above and beyond outside of high school and what he was doing. And different people were getting awards. And then they called my name. Well, I was the class clown in high school. I had long hair, like I said, rode a motorcycle, was kind of I wouldn't say a bad boy, but a goofy boy, I hung out with the bad boys, but I never really considered myself a bad boy. And I'm like, what? Yeah, Greg Lawson, come up. I got an award for the most changed. They're like, you're a cop? What the hell happened there? How did that? What kind of system do they have there that failed so badly that you got hired as a cop? you know? And so yeah, and that's just something I fell into, and it kind of became my vocation. I actually, I served a total of 6 years in the military, 4 years, a total of 6 years of my reserve time in the Army. And then I did 4 years in the Navy. And then I did 2 years Air Force Reserves, which included 2 deployments during that 2 years.
Wow.
And yeah, people always like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, you volunteer. They don't care as long as you have the
Well, thank you for your service. Like, to me, the men and women that are willing to answer the call, fight, bleed, and die so the rest of us can enjoy the blessings of liberty are incredible people. And it's a debt that none of us can ever truly repay. But the very least I can do is say thank you.
Thank you. And I just hope those people that you're talking about don't ever find out what the truth is. Because I think we're at that post-truth society at this point where, the twists of people's perception becomes reality, and people accept it as reality. And I hope we don't get to that point to where, we actually have to go through a conflict. History tells us that we will. But during my time, I went to I did a couple of campaigns, and I really had a good time. The taxpayers of the United States sent me to a lot of different countries, and got to do a lot of cool stuff. I got to help a lot of people, and I got to have a lot of fun while I was doing it. So,
amen, brother.
I think that helped me out a lot as far as my perspective on leadership. Later, I'm going to go back in law enforcement. They're kind of lost. They're kind of confused about how they want their officers to be and what kind of leaders they want them to be. They have an idea, but of a goal, but how to get there is very difficult. Just because of all of the different pressures that are on people. And, you got a lot of law enforcement agencies that rely on the military for leadership because it makes sense, because law enforcement is pseudo, it's kind of based on a military structure. Mm-hmm. And so they think that that's appropriate. And it may be for some for some law enforcement agencies, but when there's civil service involved, there's very few leadership schools that circle around civil service, because civil service throws in all kinds of wrenches in what you can do as leaders. And I went back to school in 2013. I had a bachelor's, and then I went back to get my master's, and I decided to do it in education, but I concentrated all my efforts in what's called complex adaptive systems. And it also has to do with leadership. So it's occupational workforce and leadership studies as well. And so that was real interesting on both sides of it, because, as far as leadership, men's role in society is changing pretty rapidly. And we're having to take a lot of different ideas from a lot of different schools of thought, a lot of different disciplines, to try to amalgamate something into a leadership style that will be accepted by all. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons this show exists, and one of the reasons the Sovereign Man movement exists, is because I believe that society's lost its way. And I believe this was a deliberate effort that was a multi-generational effort by, frankly, no better way to put it, but the forces of godless communism. In 1917, when the Russian monarchy was overthrown by Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, they wanted to create a worldwide revolution. They wanted a one world state. And their belief was that in order for them to do that, they had to defeat the United States. The United States was who they called the main adversary. So Vladimir Lenin sent one of his acolytes, a man named Willy Munzenberg, who was a German communist, to the United States with the express mission of recruiting people to help him weaken and defeat the United States over a multi-generational period from within. So from 1917, they started to destabilize the education system, storytelling, which is primarily Hollywood, and also the media. So academia, Hollywood, and the media were slowly infiltrated by the communists. And if you go back 100 years and you look at textbooks in, let's say, a school in North Carolina, you would see that you had patriotic education then. Kids were being taught how great America was and about American exceptionalism, and they were being taught about God and country and so forth. And 100 years later, all that's gone. And masculinity and manhood have been attacked by the same godless communists who want to turn us against each other. It's all about divide and rule. And if you study what Mao did in China when he took over, he basically very quickly attacked traditional Chinese culture and did away with traditional, roles of men and women. And that's how he was able to consolidate power. That plus the fact that he killed 100 million people. And
it helps to cull the herd if they're having problems.
Yeah. Tell me about it. So right now we exist because we want to show men, hey, this show is about making men masculine again. And to make men masculine again, you gotta put up the exemplar of masculinity for them to understand what masculinity is. And every man should be proud of being a man. Every man should be proud of being a masculine man. And this crap about toxic masculinity is nothing but a load of crap. And anybody who calls a man, toxic for being masculine is a misandrous piece of crap, as far as I'm concerned. And we do what we do because we want to attract men to us who feel, without perhaps understanding intellectually why, that something's wrong, something's off, and all this BS that society's throwing their way doesn't compute. And when they hear our message and the message of people like us, then we have a shot. And it's my belief that the Sovereign Man podcast and the Sovereign Man movement can attract hundreds of thousands of people to our message, and 10,000 people that get actively involved, 10,000 men getting actively involved in what we do will allow us to transform a society. And that's kind of my mission, Greg. That's why I bring people like you on the show.
Well, the interesting thing that you pointed out in that is the concerted effort of taking over the media, the academia, and like you said, I'm going to throw Hollywood in there as you defined it, because they have such a mass appeal. They influence so much. They know themselves when they get their awards how much they affect America, and I use an A when I spell that. Yeah. In their award ceremonies and what they say and everything, and then when psychologists will come in and say, "Hey, you guys are aggrandizing this, or you're diluting that, or whatever," and in cases of, let's say, games or violent Hollywood movies, you're influencing people on how they commit crimes, and they do this, and they'll blow that off. Academia, I have a master's degree in education. The one organization that should be done away with is the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education. It's what is going on there is horrible. It is a political revolution that's going on there, and they do have control over our primary and secondary schools at this point. They have control over most of collegiate, universities and that sort of level of education. And it's pretty scary because there are bad things that men do. We have some traits that if we go down that road, we can be very violent. We can be very, stoic in our belief, whether our belief system is just something created out of our training and experience, or whether it's something out of, trying to do good. There are things that men do that are bad, and there are things that women do that are bad. And to lump us all in, like you said, into a situation where masculinity is bad, I'm pretty sure we survived this long because we complemented each other, men and women.
Yeah.
And I think it's good that men are afforded their feminine side, if you want to call it that, where if you cried when I was a kid, that wasn't a good thing. In Rockdale, Texas, crying was not a good thing for a boy or a man to do. Today, I think it's much more accepted because we do cry, and we typically have to hide to cry. Now it's much more accepted and those things. So I think there's a little bit of a balance to being a man. Like I was a child abuse detective for several years, and I went to a university criminal justice course as a speaker. The professor asked me to come in and talk about it. And for 30 minutes, and just like right now, it's hard. I stood up there and cried for 30 minutes in front of these people and did my talk. And a couple of people sitting in the front row were just looking at me. And at the end, I said, you got who has questions or whatever. And this one guy was sitting in front of me. He goes, wow. And I was like, what? And he goes, are you okay? I said, yeah, I deserve this. I deserve to be able to stand in front of you and cry and tell you what, I wasn't blubbering, but I just couldn't control it. I just, I told certain things that happened to certain kids in the interviews I did, and you can't not. Can't not do it.
I mean,
unless you're a complete
human,
unless you're a complete psychopath, maybe. But
it's you're a human being. You cry. You want to cry. You should cry.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to cry, but it's just one of those things that, when you're assigned a task, you can embrace that task and do the best you can at it. Or you can, just crumble about it and think nothing but that, and just allow it to consume you. And I think that's something that, like I said, the men and women complement each other in a way that, a lot of men can work through that and be strong in that way. Not to say that women can't be strong that way. I'm just saying.
Look, you don't need to say that here. Like, the honest truth is that you just don't need to say that here. Like, you don't need to have those qualifying crap things that are out there in society. Like, men and women are different. We get it.
They are.
Men, and there are women who are supremely tough and smart. And in some ways, women are way tougher than men, but in other ways, they're not. And to pretend otherwise is a big source of the problems that as a society we're experiencing. I think it's a
group theme
I think it's a problem that Hollywood movies are portraying women as being these superheroes on screen that can beat up all the doofusy men, because some girls are going to think in real life that's the case, and it's not. It's not. And
I assure you, as a police officer, we see that.
I bet you do. And I've seen women just get up and go get in the face of the wrong dude, like one of those asshole dudes, right? And those dudes will punch them and they don't give a damn, you know?
Or a cop. You wanna fight like a man, we're gonna fight like a man. You come over and punch somebody in the face or grab somebody by the throat or whatever, you're gonna find yourself on your back and rolling over real quick with handcuffs on you. And that happens. And it's amazing. I've seen the transformation just in my 3 decades, of doing this job, the transformation of the brazenness of society now. And you see them do all kinds of stuff on TV, but you never see the ramifications at the end. You don't see them in jail. You don't see them paying, tens of thousands of dollars in fines. You don't see any of that because they don't cover that. They just cover, look, this person stood up to the man, like, okay, all righty.
No, you can't do that. And the truth of the matter is that we need a society that honors men and women and doesn't crap on women to make men better and doesn't crap on men to make women better. Although honestly, these days it's crapping on men to elevate women, not the other way around. So let's be honest about what's actually going on out there. So
if we would stick with the Martin Luther King thing, judge a person based on their character, not on their sex or their color of their skin or their religion or anything. What is their character?
I have a dream where one day, my son will be judged not by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. That is one of the greatest speeches of all time. And I mean, the energy and the passion with which he delivered that speech was incredible.
And the funny thing is at this point in 2021, we've almost gone opposite of that. It's so funny. We in law enforcement will be at a scene and go, okay, what's your name? What's your date of birth? What are you? What's your ethnicity? And people lose their minds. Why do you need to know that? I'm like, because the federal government requires me to record it, not the cop. Everybody says the cops are racist. It's like the federal government is the one requiring me to write down what your race is.
Actually, the vast majority of people know the cops aren't racist. It's just some crazy people that, unfortunately, because they're very loud, get an outsized voice, and the media wants to amplify that crap. But most people know that cops aren't racist as a whole.
As a whole,
in fact, I would argue that as a whole, cops are less racist than the population as a whole. That is my argument.
Yeah. There are rednecks of all colors and creeds, right? We fall back right again. Are you trying to do the right thing? Or are you just trying to cause problems? And we got cops that try to cause problems. We got men that try to cause problems. We got women that try to cause problems. And we got to look at what is the character? What are they doing? Are they just having a bad day? Or is this who they really are?
Yeah.
And I think we need to call them on it because for bad things to happen is for good men good men and women to stand by and do nothing. And
that's the quote from Edmund Burke. The only condition necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to stand by and do nothing.
Do nothing, man.
No, it's good. And, so you're a military man, you're a cop, and you're a paranormal investigator and author. So how did that happen?
It's a freaking train wreck, man. So when I was 5, I had a brother that was 12 years older than me. So he was 17 and he had a Triumph Bonneville 1970 Triumph Bonneville motorcycle. And he would pick his little 5-year-old brother up, set him on the tank of the motorcycle, and we would go driving around Central Texas looking for abandoned buildings, graveyards, anything creepy, right? And he would take me out and we would go to the graveyard. Like if we were going to the graveyard, he would take me to, we would look around for the youngest kid buried in the graveyard, right? And I'm using that word improperly. Graveyard is where graves are next to a church. A cemetery is out by itself. And primarily we have cemeteries in the United States. So the cemetery. And then he would make up some story about how this kid died. And it would always have something to do with like something I was doing. Like, he saw me playing with my robot on the swing set up, well, this kid had a robot and he was on the swing set and fell off and broke his neck. And, yeah, I was 5 years old, man. He tortured me.
With you.
Jesus. So that happened. And so when I got into elementary school and junior high, I did that to my friends. And in high school, in high school, me and my buddies were just all about urban exploration, going in, old houses, old abandoned buildings, abandoned farmhouses, cemeteries. So I was always really interested in that. And then when I went into the Army and I got to go to Alaska, like I said, Central America, Northern Africa, Middle East, every time I had any time at all, I would go off into the indigenous population and go look for the weird stuff, right? And back then we didn't have an internet. We didn't have the interweb. And you actually had to go to the library and look stuff up, or to a historical society and look stuff up. So I was not a big reader. I like I said, I was at that time, I was just kind of a free spirit, sort of, in the Army, if you can be a free spirit. But anyway, so I concentrated more on, okay, we're going to go to Guatemala. I'm going to find out a little bit on what's going on in Guatemala. What are the legends? What are the, the cool things there? What are the big haunted buildings? And so I would look stuff up that way. And I just got really interested in it. And I've done it for many, many years. And then about 15 years ago or so, there were some TV shows that came on, the Ghost Hunters and all that. And they're out running around in the dark looking for ghosts. And I was like, man, I've been doing that for 30 years. That's something I've been interested in this whole time. And so I ended up writing a book called Zombie Advocacy, which would be like the reversal of what The Walking Dead would be. If we had some zombies out there, there'd be some First Amendment attorneys and some other attorneys that would jump on board and fight for their rights to be zombies. And so that's kind of the book I wrote. And that got me a lot of speaking gigs in different conferences, paranormal conferences. And I realized how badly they were doing their investigations, being, my law enforcement background, being former homicide, being former sex crimes and all that detective. I thought, you know what, I'm going to write them a book on how to use industry standard practices on collecting evidence and evaluating evidence and doing interviews pretty
cool, man.
Yeah. So that's what I did. And I started getting invited to a lot of these places and a lot of these different events. And I've had a blast since then. It's been a lot of fun. I've traveled all over the place. I've did a book signing in Transylvania at Bron Castle.
Shut up. How cool are you, man? In Transylvania at Bron Castle, Dracula's castle, bro. That's awesome.
Yeah, we actually took a trip with a guy named Dave Schrader. He's he has a TV show on the Travel Channel called The Halser Files, and he's used to be on Coast to Coast quite a bit and had a Darkness Radio. And so we did we went with him, and we went from where Dracula was born to where he was educated, to where he was imprisoned, to where he fought battles, to where he had his castles, to where he died and went to his. So I've been to his birthplace and to his where he died and where he's interred in Snagoff Island. And
so Dracula was a historical figure.
Yeah, he was a guy named Vlad Tepes, and his father's moniker, like he was kind of a lord, and they called him Dracul, which was the dragon. And Vlad Tepes was actually, like in Texas, Sam Houston, right?
Come on.
Yeah, we have heroes here in Texas. Well, in Romania, Vlad Tepes is a hero. He kept the Hungarians out of Romania, out of that area. He was a very powerful Lord General that basically took no crap. He was the example of what we're talking about as far as bad sides of masculinity, right?
If you take no crap, you're defending your country. There's nothing bad about that.
Yeah, he went a little overboard, but some of the tales about him was he had this golden, a solid gold goblet that he put by the town well, and you could drink out of this gold goblet, and nobody ever stole it.
I'll bet.
Because he would ram a stick up your colon and through the top of your head and impale you on a stick. And that tended to
discourage thieves.
Yeah. He did some pretty horrible stuff. A lot of the merchant class was becoming very, very powerful at that point because prior to that it was a feudal system and the lords were just who owned everything, and they would impose taxes on the peasants. And well, the peasants started bartering and trading and becoming wealthy, and they turned into that merchant class. And that merchant class really didn't like the fact that these lords had this power, and they kind of politically wrangled to kind of force their power away from them, take some of their power away from them. And so Vlad Tepes would invite you over for dinner and have a big dinner and then kill all of you. And then that would straighten out the merchant class for a little while. Yeah. So he had some good ideas and he had some bad ideas, and that's that bad side of course, you got Elizabeth Bathory also. She's, probably one of the most prolific serial killers in the history of the world. And she's bathing in the freaking her victim's blood to keep herself young. So women on the female side, they got some issues.
They got some crazy. So when did she do what she did? What era was she from?
Yeah, she that would have been, I want to say around 14th, 15th century.
Wow.
And she had she was married to a very powerful guy and he died. So she took over all of his lands, and she came from an aristocratic family. And
she was a psychotic serial killer.
Yeah. Yeah. They estimate around 650 women were killed. And there was a big investigation on it. And some of the people that were helping her, what would be turned state's evidence today, they were killed also after they told what was going on and blamed it all on her. But the castle got to stinking so bad because they were stacking bodies down in the dungeon and all these women were just disappearing. It was crazy. Yeah, it's Elizabeth Bathory is a very intriguing case study on psychopathy and
Wow. Your background as a cop has held you in good stead in your career as an paranormal investigator and author. It's fantastic. So let's talk about your latest book.
All right, Roswell, the After Action Report. Oh,
cool.
There you go.
So tell us about it.
Yeah. So the folks that are listening in or watching might not know that much about Roswell. In the paranormal community, in the UFO, alien, conspiracy theory communities, everybody knows about Roswell, and everybody that has interviewed me said,
X-Files.
Yeah. X-Files. Yeah. Everybody has said, why in the world would you write another book about Roswell? I think there's enough freaking books about Roswell. We don't want to hear any more about Roswell. Well, So I've been, my wife, Lynn, and I have been traveling to Roswell for, I don't know, 14, 15 years. We go to the conference up there. We haven't been in the last 3 or 4 years. But through those years, I've talked to anybody that matters in any way that has to do with Roswell. I have stacks or I had got rid of them because I turned it into this, but I had stacks and stacks of books and notes and pamphlets and stuff all about Roswell. And it's been sitting on my desk for years. And last year, Lynn was like, you need to write this book and just get it off there. And so I've sat back going, well, what am I going to write about it? Well, everybody's written everything. Well, I started thinking about it and I went, you know what? Forensic statement examination of the interviews that were done by the Air Force and about the Roswell incident. And I'm going to take a look at their report and all the other things that have happened and write from a forensic analysis of the event and the statements made. And I think that served my purpose. This is a different book than your standard Roswell book. It gives you the backstory on Roswell, but it also gives you a non-contemporary perspective. That's one of the things when you're looking at a cold case like Roswell, happened in 1947. The story goes, a rancher was riding his horse and found a bunch of strange debris. A couple of days or weeks later, depending on who you listen to, he collects up some of this debris, takes it into the sheriff in Roswell and says, hey, I found this on my ranch. The sheriff's like, I don't know what that is. So he contacts the Army airfield at Roswell. They send out an intelligence officer and a counterintelligence officer. They go back out to the ranch, collect up the rest of the debris, bring the debris back in. They do a press release that the Roswell Army Airfield has captured a flying saucer in the Roswell region. This goes out on the AP, man. Everybody got it.
Wow.
Yeah. And the general of the 8th Air Force was out of Carswell, what would be Carswell Air Force Base today, Roswell Army Airfield then, says, oh, wait a second, you need to fly that stuff out to me. They flew it out. In my opinion, they swapped out the material for a weather balloon, and they had a press release and took photos of this officer who collected this material with these weather balloon pieces. Now, I don't know if you know the difference between a weather balloon and a spaceship with aliens that came from another planet, but I'm pretty sure this officer, even if he didn't know what it was, he would not identify it as something not of this world, as opposed to, hey, this is a weather balloon.
It's a weather balloon. I'm figuring most officers would have that level of understanding and intelligence to figure that out.
Now, there's I just skipped over 70 years of conspiracy theory in there. I condensed that into, a minute and a half dissertation on what the nuts and bolts are of this case. So the Air Force was tasked at investigating this and coming forward with the Roswell report to tell everybody what happened. Well, let me ask you a question. If you killed your wife, would it be a good idea if I asked you to investigate your case?
No.
It doesn't make any sense, right?
None.
So they allow the Air Force to investigate their own conspiracy cover-up. It just makes no sense. The whole thing just makes no sense. So I go in and it'd
be like letting Hillary Clinton investigate the Benghazi cover-up.
Yeah. Or some emails. I don't know.
Yeah, or some emails. Yeah, the internet cover-up.
So I go, okay, the only thing I have from the Air Force is what they put together in this 1,000-page report, which actually consists of about 17 pages that matter. And so it took me a couple of years to go through that and kind of call out key things about it. So that's what I write about. And there's the deception that continues to this very day that the Air Force does. And I don't know whether they do it out of design, out of incompetency, or out of arrogance. I think yeah. And but they're not truthful. You shouldn't trust what they have to say. And I was in the Air Force, and I am a absolute 100% patriotic supporter of our military, but I do know that they do things oftentimes for a reason. Those reasons sometimes can be not well informed, and they just decide to do it a certain way. And, it continues to this very day. So that's the Roswell report, or the after action report.
Roswell, the after action, we'll make sure that's in the show notes. People can pick it up. Okay. I'd like to get a copy of it. I mean, that's a fascinating tale that you've woven here for me. And I'm a big fan of books. If I can get you to sign a copy for me, I'd be really, really thrilled.
I'm sure there's some way I can do that.
That would be great. That'd be great. I collect, signed editions from authors. Being an author myself, I think that's a pretty cool thing. So yes. I got to tell you, one of the stories that's always fascinated me has been the story of Jack the Ripper. They never caught the bastard. And I'm wondering if that's ever been of interest to you, because I think that would be a very, very cool story to have another take on it come out. I haven't heard much about Jack the Ripper lately, but his story absolutely fascinates me.
So to answer that question, I've been to Spitalfields, I've been to Whitechapel, and I've been there many times. And I've been there with some pretty prominent paranormal investigators, prominent mediums, and some historical investigators that have spent millions of dollars on doing their own. Well, I should millions. That would infer more than two. Probably close to $1 million in investigating this and writing books. I have been there. I've walked those streets at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I've drank a lot of drinks at Tin Bells, one of the taverns that some of the women used to frequent, and one of them left that night and was murdered, not very far from where she was just partying, 30 minutes to an hour prior. It's an amazing area of London. And as a matter of fact, on my website, my main banner photograph is in Whitechapel. We were walking around down there at, I don't know, midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that.
Well, the answer is this is an area of interest for you.
Yeah. And so the tie-in I have on it, other than everybody else's tie-in, that is it's this historical serial killer that did this. And the canonical 5 women that they say he did, well, there was a lot more murders at that same time in that area. They just weren't murdered in that way. A lot of them were stabbed to death. Some of them were bludgeoned, some of them, but the ones that you always hear about, that canonical 5 women that are for sure attributed to Jack the Ripper. The tie-in with that is in 1884 to 1886, here in Texas, Austin, Texas, we had the Austin Axe Murderer, also known as the Servant Girl Annihilator. He had a bunch of different monikers that, of course, the media, trying to sell them papers, had to give him a cool name. So he killed, for sure, the canonical 8 here in Austin. And that would have placed him at the forefront of serial killers in the United States in 1884. But law enforcement then didn't know what they were looking at. They didn't have serial killers. They didn't pay that much attention to evidence and how something was done, and how things were very similar. But anyway, in 1886, the murder stopped, and there was one individual that they were looking for, which he goes by the Malay Cook. That's what they know. They didn't know his name, but he worked at a restaurant, and he was a suspect of interest. And he fled during this time. And he went to the Texas coast and caught a boat and went to England and ended up settling in London. And lo and behold, women started getting killed in Spitalfields and Whitechapel. And so, Scotland Yard was actually looking for the Malay cook for a while because they had read articles that were on the AP back then, because this was a big deal in the United States. And nobody pays any attention to it today. Most people don't even know about it. And that was a case that was not technically solved. They blamed it on one particular individual that probably did it. But it wasn't anything as spectacular as Jack the Ripper. So, yeah, I've done a bunch of work on that, and I'm in negotiations with my wife on what my next book is going to be, because I really want to do one on the servant girl murders. But I don't think it'll sell. I don't think it's going to serve any purpose. So I'm struggling with that.
I beg to differ.
I have a passion for it, but I don't know.
I beg to differ. I think if you tie it into what happened in England with Jack the Ripper, I think it could sell very well.
Yeah, I have some ideas, but we'll see.
You know, the transatlantic tie would make a fresh take on that, and I bet you could get a lot of takers for that idea.
There's been a couple of books written on it, and it's been lightly suggested, but it was really interesting because Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show was in London at the time. And you can imagine, he's put this carnival together, right? Use a better word. And they've shipped all these people that, you got mountain men, you got cowboys, you got real Indians, you got this big diverse group of people that are going around the United States and then get to go over to England. And there's a really cool story because one of the Indians who was a chief ended up bailing when he was in London. He didn't make the boat. He's like, I'm going to stay here. And he just walked around basically as a transient in downtown London. And people thought he was cool and would invite him over and give him lunch and give him some money and give him places to stay. And he just kind of hung around. He actually wrote a little bit about that. When he came back, he had a pin, somebody who helped him pin his exploits while he was there. But one of the things was one of the other cowboys in that group was also investigated for the Jack the Ripper murders. He was a cowboy from Fredericksburg, Texas. And they actually brought him in and questioned him and all that. And so there's some interesting ties between those two.
Well, I'll tell you what would make an interesting idea. And this just, I'm just spitballing here, thinking out loud, as they say. But it'd be cool to have the traditional book that you would write side by side with a piece of fiction and go into the facts, and then have a fiction book and co-release them as part of the same idea at the same time.
Right. Yeah. My the book that I ended up starting, I'm about 30,000 words into it, and I kind of stalled, was a historical fiction on the servant girls. And a guy named Skip Hollingsworth wrote it's not historical fiction. It's historical, but it's creative. What is that? Creative true crime.
Yeah.
So he follows all the true crime stuff, but then also adds in, people
creative
on the
license.
street.
Yeah.
People on the street, what was going on around Austin at the time, what people may have been talking about, things like that. So it's a really great book. There's a book called a Twist at the End, and then The Midnight Assassin by Skip Hollingsworth is great. It is a great book.
Is it? All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's a great book.
If he's an interesting cat, I'll bring him on one of my shows. I think it'd be cool.
He is a longtime reporter for the Texas Monthly.
I love the Texas Monthly.
Yeah, he's also an independent writer, and he's a big deal. He does a lot of what I call real speaking engagements and real places with credibility and stuff like universities and stuff when I'm, at the casino in the Velveeta room talking about ghosts.
Hey, man, that's awesome. Well, I got to tell you, Greg, I've really enjoyed this conversation. You brought a fresh take on men and masculinity for us today, and I again appreciate your service to the cause of freedom. And you're a fellow author, and you're doing some really cool things. And hey, if you decide to do that Jack the Ripper, and you're going to do the nonfiction part of it, I'll put my hand up. I'll write the fiction part of it for you. Let's get it
interesting. It'd be fun to do.
That would be
kind of cool.
I think that'd be cool. I really do. I think that'd be fun.
I don't know whether anybody's ever done anything like that.
No, they haven't. That's why I think it would really work. And if it was released at the same time as, as part of the same ethos, I think people would go, wow, that's cool. That's different. Book sales would be
some sort of exact same cover, but with something different on it. You
got it.
That would be interesting.
That'd be interesting. No question about it. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And it's always great to speak to a fellow writer, and especially one who's a patriot and who believes that masculinity is something important and needs to be preserved. And I think that my listeners are going to really enjoy listening to this episode. So thanks again, brother. And that's a wrap.
My pleasure, man. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man Podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.